Hi, my name's Emma Bombonato. My normal day job is working as the Environmental Sustainability Manager at the Sydney Opera House. And I also have been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to support the team and the Trust to develop their Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, which was adopted by Eryldene in October last year. The development of the plan is an objective of Eryldene's strategic plan. And because this is recognised as a strategic imperative, it demonstrates that the Trust is proactively putting measures in place to conserve Eryldene in a holistic way. For example, the strategic plan also considers other very important social sustainability issues like safety, health and wellbeing, accessibility and visitor engagement. An environmental sustainability plan is necessary for Eryldene because the process enables the people who maintain the site to gain a better understanding of the types of activities that impact the environment and therefore require management. The process allows us to unpack global issues that threaten places like significant heritage gardens in a way that is practical and impactful across the different areas of the site's operation. So this would include areas like garden, maintenance, plantings, building upkeep, and the management of the impact of all of the wonderful events that are held on the site. Most significantly, this process allows Eryldene to put in place practices now that protect and conserve the site's heritage values and significance. Eryldene, like many historic places, holds such an important value for the local community. Another reason why the plan is so important is because it helps to better understand and uncover what good management looks like. Offering useful and practical examples of environmental and climate risk management in this unique context helps build capacity within the teams and the community as we share knowledge, our challenges and learnings as part of the development and implementation of this process. Ultimately, what this helps to do is build a network of people who understand the need for the management of heritage gardens and historic sites in order to build resilience to future shocks and stresses like climate change. The process that I'm about to talk you through helped the working group to land on 5 headline goals, which are important focus areas of the plan. The goals include everything from establishing good governance through to embracing leadership opportunities to share knowledge and learnings, like we are doing in this session today, to help and inspire others. So today I'm going to talk through the process that we undertook to develop the plan. One of the most important elements of the process was to undertake a site visit with Sheridan Burke and the team. A site visit gave me the opportunity to better understand the types of activities undertaken because it helps paint a picture associated with environmental impacts that need to be captured. For instance, I visited on a very wet and rainy day, which meant we talked a lot about waterlogged gardens, drainage issues, the need for gutter repair and mossy footpaths. It was extremely valuable to talk to wonderful volunteers during the site visit. Everyone I spoke to had such excellent knowledge of the site operations and also had subject matter expertise, including the history and significance of camellia species that are part of the garden's collection. I also learned that a lot of great work has already been undertaken, so we're not necessarily starting the process from scratch. This included an excellent water use management plan, which was developed by Trust member Bruce. We were also able to draw out the priority actions in this plan to ensure that they were adequately captured in the sustainability plan. By walking through the site and chatting to people, asking lots of questions, we were able to pull together enough information to form the basis of a number of workshops and discussions with Eryldene's Trust members. We used the time to dive deeper into management issues that would then become priority areas for the plan. At the same time, I undertook some basic analysis of the utility bills, like water and electricity, to understand the carbon footprint of Eryldene's house. The structure of the workshop covered 2 distinct areas which laddered up to climate resilience. The first looked at Eryldene's operational impact on the environment. So this would include the site's resource use, waste generation, and overall carbon emissions. The plan would need to address these impacts through efficiency and emissions reduction, and this is called mitigation. The second looks at the impact of the environment on Eryldene. So this includes impact of extreme weather as an example. This plan needs to also address these risks and consider how to modify practices or put measures in place to minimise the impact. This is called adaptation. Here you will see an example of some analysis of utility bills. As you can see, It helps tell us a story about when impacts occur so we can hone in on management opportunities. Electricity use is significantly higher during winter, and that might not come as much as a surprise to many because it's related to heating, but it does help us have a robust conversation about the type of heating that's used and alternatives that might be available. The same can be said for water use. The comparison of water use during drought conditions compared to a more typical year demonstrates that water use can actually double during this period. Water use on site is important to address from both a resource and cost perspective, particularly when we flip back into drought conditions and when water restrictions apply. When you layer this with the need to protect and conserve heritage gardens, we rely on a steady supply of water, so you can start to see immediately where the top management priorities are. The working group looked at resource use and impacts of sustainable events, given that events are such an important part of Eryldene's visitor engagement calendar. An action in the plan included the need to develop an event checklist, which looked to minimise the impacts of events as they occur on site. You can see some great examples in the pictures of reusable crockery, because we need to eliminate the single-use items. It's a nicer guest experience, and it's also a much better alternative to single-use cups and plates that ultimately would have ended up in landfill. The second part of the workshop was to look at mapping weather impacts. The process of mapping weather impacts included identifying the weather conditions that impact the site into categories. For example, in Eryldene, we looked at storms and high winds, heat waves and drought conditions, and intense rain events or prolonged rain. Although we did discuss future climate scenarios and impacts, the working group did acknowledge that the weather impacts are occurring on site now. Being in the middle of a La Nina cycle immediately after a drought meant that the group were already dealing with these management issues. So the exercise that we undertook to talk through each type of weather event, capture the impacts and discuss what controls were already in place to mitigate the impacts were really important. Just by following this systematic process for each type of weather event and attaching a risk score or risk rating, we were able to build a picture of the key priorities. We were able to better understand where gaps and opportunities for improvement existed. And this is before we even start to think about scenarios that in the future, 5, 10 or 20 years from now. So here I've included an extract of the Climate Risk Register, which is an outcome of this process. So I'll talk through 3 examples. My first example you can see is to look at the impact of drought conditions and prolonged heat and lack of rainfall on rare and significant plant species like the camellia collection at Eryldene. The team rated this as very high given the consequences related to losing this significant species on site. You will note that despite identifying controls, the residual risk rating remained high due to the significance of the camellia species. This indicates to us that is one of Eryldene's most critical management priorities. The second example is related to the impact of drought and dry conditions on event lawns. Lawns stay green due to the natural rainfall and will naturally brown off during dry periods at times when water restrictions might apply. There was some good conversation about whether lawns should be maintained by irrigation or left to brown off. What it does is impacts events given lawns that form part of the event space. But ultimately, we also talked about the fact that there would be species of grass that is replaced with a more water-wise or drought-tolerant option over time. This is a really good example of an adaptation measure. We'd also talked about the ability to communicate why the lawns are drowning off to our visitors as an example of good environmental practice and leadership. My last example is the impact of high winds on storms, falling branches, which might lead to things like property damage, safety risks, insurance claims or higher premiums, or even cancelled events. A number of events had to be postponed last year due to La Nina, bringing intense storms and higher than average rainfall. So we know that these impacts are happening now. The working group followed this process for each weather hazard, and we identify key vulnerabilities to extreme weather, and thus also for future climate scenarios. The vulnerabilities included the camellia collection, management of the gardens and lawns, Eryldene house and building structures, including preventative maintenance and reactive maintenance and the costs associated with these, and the experiences, because events are an important part of Eryldene's income. One of the most important parts of this plan is to capture data related to resource use and impacts related to weather. This might be costs associated with maintenance or any kinds of insurance claims. This is really important to ensure that we're looking at trends over time to make really informed decisions. Data helps to monitor performance. Regular check-ins to ensure issues remain in check or are addressed in a timely manner are really important. It's also important to share our experience and knowledge and learnings with others, given that there are others who have similar challenges, to address these types of management issues. An annual review is important to ensure that the group are continually improving, and this is the aim of the plan over time. There's always more that can be done, so an annual review of the plan will ensure that there's dedicated opportunities that are built into further action plans. I wanted to say a big thank you to the working group for being involved in such an important process for the environmental management and conservation of Eryldene. Thank you.